For interaction channels UI design considerations, I want to revisit our survey object. And so if you recall, we created a survey object, and this is to measure different CSAT or customer satisfaction scores. And then also as well, if you look in the fields and relationships that we've also created what is called an NPS answer. That is a number field of 2 digits long, the idea of being on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend our service? And then we also noted that 6 or less is a detractor. Really, this NPS answer, we can make the field label represent the actual question. And so I'm going to click Edit here, and I'm going to rename the field label to how likely to recommend. Now, one thing with the UI consideration on this is that field labels have a limit of the number of characters, and so you can't a lot of times have the full-blown question in the field label. This leads people to solution surveys to add additional objects, for instance, where you will have like a question object and then you would have an answer object and you would tie those together. For sake of time and not to get too complex at this point, we're just going to have our questions inside of our survey object and have brief field labels. And so you notice here, my field label has been changed to NPS, how likely to recommend, question mark. I'm going to just leave the field name or the API name the same here, just NPS underscore answer, and click save. And so what you can do is in the help text, you could provide greater guidance to the end user so that if they see or if they're surveying someone saying how likely to recommend, you could provide them the script with the help text. So I'm going to edit this and provide a little bit better wording with the help text here, and I'll show you what this looks like. And this, remember, is relating to the different interaction channels UI design considerations. I'm doing this in relation to our custom application that we're creating, and this would be an interaction channel of, for instance, phone or telephony. This would be an outbound call where we're surveying someone over the phone and then recording the responses. You can also do surveys online through a web-based form, but that gets a lot more involved as well. You can do web to case and then convert a case to a survey. There's also third-party apps on the App Exchange, but we're trying to keep this simple at this point in order for you to realize how to think through some of these UI design considerations for these different interaction channels as well. And then in the next lecture, we're going to do some of the case feed configuration around this and further flesh this out. And so what I need to do here is provide the end user more detail than what is listed here, how likely to recommend. So we're going to say on a scale of 1 to 10. Okay, so I'm using the help text filter, the hover over question mark that displays in the interface to provide the end user a script, for instance, with the exact wording of the question. Now, I'm sure if you're a NPS survey expert, you're probably laughing at this example, but what I've written is on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being unlikely and 10 being extremely likely, how likely would you recommend our product or service? And so you want to give them the script, the end user, to question the customer and then provide the scale, 1 being unlikely, 10 being extremely likely, so that they know 1 is negative, 10 is extremely positive. And so then as well, we can make this required with this checkbox here, which we want this to be required. We don't want to save a survey without this NPS score being saved. We're okay with duplicate values, and we're not going to set a default value. And then the length of this is 2 characters long. It's a numeric field, so this could go up in theory to 99. We want to limit the answers to 10, so we're going to do a validation rule. This is another design consideration. We have to allow for 2 characters because we want people to be able to enter a 10, and we don't want any decimal places. We just want whole number increments. So I'm going to click Save. So I've provided the help text here, and I'll show that here in a moment. And then we want to do a validation rule for this NPS answer, which I am going to go ahead and change this API name. We've not really used this yet, so it's okay to change it. So I'm going to say NPS question instead of answer. It really combines the question and the answer. The field label is the question, and then the response will be entered in, so that would be the answer. So I don't know if that'll be any more or less confusing, but we're going to go with that. So now for the validation rule, because you're going to see this, and I'd forgotten that I've already done this. So NPS maximum, let's see if I've messed this up or not. So we've got The error condition is NPS question. You notice that the API name updated automatically. I changed it from NPS answer to NPS question, so it's already updated automatically. So when it'll throw an error is if they enter something greater than 10, and so then the error message will be this, that it has to be between 1 to 10, and I've provided the description. So I'm going to go ahead and close out that validation rule, and let's go to the service application in the app launcher, and let's show this in action now. So if we go to, let's just go to Service Cloud, for instance. And the main thing here is I'm trying to get to a contact record or an account record. So let me close out of this new case tab that was open previously, and I'm not going to save that. And so here is the account Dickinson PLC, and we've got related lists here. We've got our survey related list. And if you don't see this, you can just click on this arrow here and do edit layout and add the related list to your page layout. But I'm going to click new survey, and you notice that the account automatically populates. And then here for the contact, I'm going to enter in Stella Pavlova and select her after, I guess she doesn't belong to Dickinson. Let me see who belongs to Dickinson. So Andy Young belongs to Dickinson PLC, so we're going to survey him. So for example, and this is a good point to make here at this point, another user interface design consideration is you got to think about how end users are going to be surveying individuals with companies. You may want to enter a new survey from the account record, like we did here, and click new survey and it fills in the account, and then you would search for the contact record and fill it in. And here's Andy Young, for example, and here's our question: how likely to recommend? Now if we were on the phone with Andy, we'd sound like a fool if we said, Andy, how likely to recommend? We wouldn't win friends and influence people with that sort of phrase. And so this help text provides greater verbiage for our phone rep. So on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being unlikely and 10 being extremely likely, how likely would you recommend our product or service? I hate that question because there's too many likelies in there, but we're asking Andy, and the agent doesn't have to do it word for word, but you get the idea. So let's say that he gives us an 11 and we try and save it. Our validation rule kicks in and it says error, NPS score should be between value of 1 to 10. So Andy's a raving fan, but he's got to settle for a 10, and so we're going to click save. Now the other design consideration is, and this is probably more likely, is you'll be surveying individuals from the contact record. And remember, this is an interaction channel of an outbound phone call, okay? And so that would be a telephony sort of interaction channel, and this might be inside of a case. Another way that you can do surveys would be creating case records, but we've elected to do a custom object instead. And so the thing to bear in mind, though, is as you're doing these different interaction channels and thinking about UI design considerations, you want to think about ease of use for the end user, and if you want to leverage existing objects such as case to manage surveys or not, or if you want to create a custom object or multiple objects like I referred to before. Now you notice in the related list for Andy, I'm on his contact record now. We've got the surveys related list, and there's one survey here. Now we can customize this page layout to provide more columns here to give the user greater detail on these surveys. For example, it might be helpful to see at a glance when the survey happened. So to do so, we'd click on the Force.com menu here and edit layout. And then we need to go to the related list for surveys. And if you remember, if you took my admin course or some of the others like Platform App Builder, you've seen this done and are probably familiar with this. But the way to adjust a related list is hit this wrench icon and then select the columns that you would like to include. So we want to do created date and created by, so we see who surveyed Andy and when they did. And then we have the survey name, which is the auto number field. And then here's our question, NPS, how likely to recommend. We'll move that over. And let's sort these responses by the created date in ascending order and click OK. And then we'll click Save. And so now we return to Andy's record detail page, and we can hover over surveys and see that I just created one, the created date, created by. This is kind of overkill because the created by shows who and also the date and time. So really we don't need created date. You see, as you start to scope these things out, the UI design considerations, you start to improve and iterate over time. And then as well, we have this new survey button here from the surveys related list on the contact record. So you may want your users to hit the new survey button only from the contact and tell them you have to enter in from the contact record, and you would take this button away on the account. And once again, you can remove buttons as well, doing the same sort of edit of the page layout like we did for adding these columns. There's a section to add or remove buttons. And so if we click new survey, we could enter in a new survey here. And this isn't the greatest user experience here because we've got to search for or click the lookup icon to locate the account record that Andy belongs to. It doesn't automatically populate that. And then let's say that we've fallen on hard times as a company and Andy is mad at us, and so he gives us a 5 now. And previously we talked about in I think the description of this object, anything below a 6 would be known as a detractor. If you're familiar with Net Promoter Scores, you have a certain workflow a lot of times that you want to follow up with those that would be considered a detractor. And so I'm going to click save. And so now we've got a couple of survey records hanging off of the Andy Young record. All right, so now I want to go back to the Object Manager, and so I'm going to go over in this other tab. One thing I don't necessarily like about Lightning Experience is this search box tends to go away, and I know that there's this search setup here, but I don't find it quite as functional as this quick find feature and setup. I wish when you go to setup, it would always keep and persist the quick find, but once you're in and able to search, we want to look for the Object Manager under Survey. I want to edit the details on this. I said that this is a custom object to measure CSAT, and just for sake of completeness, I want to say, or NPS scores, and click Save. And so another thing you could do as it relates to design consideration, I'm just going to speak to this, we're not going to do all of this, but we're trying to handle CSAT surveys and NPS scores. You could introduce record types on this custom object if you think about the design considerations. And you could do a record type for CSAT and a record type for NPS so that whenever someone selects to create a new survey, it asks you what type of survey. And then from there, if you remember with record types, you can change the page layouts specifically to what type of survey it is so that you don't have unnecessary fields displayed.